This is Phoenix, and I'm going to talk about my up-and-coming book, In Defense of the Mind. In Defense of the Mind is a philosophical treatise that will be coming your way in early February of this year of 2016. I'm very excited about this book. Essentially, it's a book on the philosophy of mind. As I understand it, it posits my own theory of mind. Basically what I try to do is I try to lay a foundationalist theory of mind in order to have something to talk about, something substantial to discuss. It doesn't mean that this theory is definitive, it just means that I have a lot to bring to the table and some concerns to bring to the table. Now, I want to talk about the heart of this book, In Defense of the Mind, and you can sum it up with the phrase dualistic existentialism. Now, you might be wondering what that is. Well, this book definitely goes in depth, but I'll go ahead and tease some of the ideas, certainly the most important way of looking at it. But in order to do that, I first have to talk about the two philosophical schools that inspired that term, existential dualism. So the first term is dualism, and that is a term that is used and attributed to talk about Descartes' philosophy of mind. Basically, Descartes tried to prove that the mind and the body are separate, so the mind is its own kind of ethereal, abstract entity, and yet the body is a very physical thing. So he's basically talking about the split between the physical and the more immaterial, intangible, and the mind is essentially that intangible nature. And so that's Cartesian dualism in a nutshell. There's also existentialism, which was developed in the early 20th century by thinkers ranging from Nietzsche to Sartre. One of the most important sayings that came out of that field of thought and of study is the quote by Sartre where he says, "Man is fully responsible for his nature and his choices." Now, what's remarkable about existentialism is even though it's a very varied philosophy, it thinks about existence very seriously, and one of the most important concepts that they bring to the table is this notion of responsibility, accountability. So sometimes existentialism is seen as kind of anarchist because of its atheistic tendencies and bents. It's often seen as relativist, but actually, if you look deeper into the philosophy, they're saying a lot more, far beyond all of that. And especially when you get to the philosophy of Sartre, though even Nietzsche, but even thinkers like Kierkegaard as well, you get this idea of responsibility and accountability. And so essentially, the way that I understand existentialism is I see the existentialists trying to describe a normative way of life. So they do that by affirming existence. Now, what does this mean for me and for my theory of mind? Well, I basically combine the concepts into my notion of dualistic existentialism. What this means briefly is you have the first premise, which is the idea that we can abstract our mind. Now think about this. What does it mean if we can abstract our mind? Well, it means that we can see our mind as a separate entity, as separate from the body. We can see it as an entity that we can study, and we can study it via self-reflection, via looking at our thoughts, via metacognition, which is a psychology term. But essentially the idea of thinking about our own thought processes, that's metacognition. And I think that that's what makes that specific part really interesting in terms of thinking about why we would want to abstract our mind. Now, of course, I'm not really worried about proving whether this is true or not, whether dualism is actually true. There are plenty of thinkers that would argue that our mind is just our brain, such as Patricia Churchland. She would definitely say that the mind is just the brain and that everything is materialist. But as you'll find out when you read this book, I'm pushing against materialist theories of mind, and I have my reasons for that. However, that doesn't mean I'm setting out to prove necessarily that dualism is true. But I use dualism as a tool to be able to abstract the mind, to again be able to think about it seriously and self-reflect on it. Now, the second premise would be the existentialist notion of accountability and responsibility. And when you think seriously about this, this notion of responsibility and accountability, man is fully responsible for his nature and his choices, and you combine these two concepts, what you're left with is this idea that we are in complete control of our mind. Now, of course, I argue back and forth about this. I offer a more softer version of dualistic existentialism, the more softer points of existentialism, certain things that we have to take into account. But the main point is that if you use dualistic existentialism as a theory of mind and you take it very seriously, what you're left with is a normative way to look at the mind. You're left with a normative way to perceive your mind. I want to close by saying that a lot of theories of mind focus on trying to explain what the mind is. Now, I may try to do that to a degree, but I'm not really worried about the biology. I'm not really worried about the neurobiology. I'm not really worried about the physical properties of the brain. I'm not really worried about even at some points the philosophy of mind. What I'm really trying to do is develop a normative way of looking at the mind to improve a person's well-being and to improve the way in which they look at their mind. So yeah, so that is in a nutshell the heart of this book, Cartesian or existential dualism, and that is what existential dualism means. I'm very excited about this book and keep a lookout for it, and I hope that I've piqued your interest. Again, this is Phoenix, and thank you.